So what about commands? Commands represent actions the user would like the application to perform, such as saving a file or copying the current selection to the clipboard. WPF defines a load of standard commands, well over 100 of the things. So there are all the usual application operations, such as you'd expect to find on the file and copy menus. Then there are commands for scrolling and paging through content of some kind. There are also commands for applying formatting for text. There are commands for controlling a media player. And there are web-style navigation commands. You'll find all of these commands exposed as objects available as static properties of the classes listed here. But the thing to understand here is that none of these commands actually does anything. The application commands.copy command doesn't have the first clue what it's for. These things are nothing more than names. WPF provides the standard commands purely so that we can have one common representation for copy that we can all agree on. They're just an identifier. So what use are these things? Well, although the copy command itself is nothing more than a name, some of the controls in WPF provide an implementation of that command. For example, the text box has an implementation for copy, as does the flow document viewer. And the rich text box implements not just the clipboard commands, it also implements all of the formatting commands defined by the editing commands class. And this is always the pattern. Commands on their own mean nothing. For a command to be useful, it has to be executed in the context of a particular user interface element. So it's not enough to say copy. I have to be copying some particular piece of data in a specific control. And this is reflected in the API for handling commands. So let's look at how to implement a command handler. I've got a user interface here with a couple of buttons, each associated with a command. As you can see, this first button is associated with the application commands.copy command, and this second button is associated with the paste command. If I run this, you'll see that both buttons are grayed out. This is because there's nothing in this user interface that knows what to do with the commands. Nothing is volunteered to handle either copy or paste here, and the command system has worked that out. When you associate a button or a menu item with a command, they ask the command system, the control asks WPF, is this command enabled right now? And the button or the menu item will grey itself out if the command's not ready. So in order to enable these buttons, I need to provide a handler for the command. Now I could do that by putting a text box on the page, because it provides built-in handlers for copy and paste. But my goal here is to show you how to provide handlers for commands yourself. So, let's go into the code behind and tell WPF that I like to handle these commands. So WPF needs to know two things. It needs to know which commands I'd like to handle, but it also needs to know the context. The context is important because I might have 4 or 5 different controls on the page, all of which could handle a copy command. So, when you invoke a command, WPF takes the location of the keyboard focus into account when trying to find a handler. So if I'm providing a command handler, I need to tell WPF the context in which I'd like to add that handler. So it looks like this. I have to build a command binding object. And I tell the command binding which command I'm interested in. So here I'm going to build a command binding for the copy command. And I have to tell this command binding which user interface element it's associated with. So it's the copy command. Let me put the missing parenthesis on the end there. And this copy command is going to be handled in the context of the whole window in this case. I'm going to say any time that the copy command is invoked in this window, I'd like to handle it. So I add the binding to the command bindings collection for this window. So every element in the UI tree has a collection of command bindings. And this says, here are the commands for which handlers exist for this particular UI element. And then, on the binding itself, I just hook up a handler for the executed event. And I'm just going to print out a debug message saying copy executed. So now I should find, when I try to run this, that the button is no longer grayed out. Except I'm missing... Oh, I was too aggressive on my parentheses there. So I run this, And now you can see the copy button is enabled. And if I click it, that copy executed runs. So WPF was able to work out that the copy command was available because I'd provided a binding for that command in the context of the window. So when the button said, I do the copy command, does anyone handle this right now? WPF said, yes, the window handles it. So the button goes, great, I'll light myself up. And when I click it, WPF finds my command binding and invokes the executed handler. By the way, if you've got a command binding, you can also decide at runtime whether the thing should be enabled or not. There is a can execute event you can attach a handler to, and in that you get to set a flag that says whether or not any buttons or menu items attached to this command should be grayed out.